One thought which comes to our mind all the time, that we as an Indian would like each and every Indian to have access to electricity. We are also aware, as Mr. Dhol mentioned, all of us know, that certain areas are remote areas, so therefore we have to have off-grid electricity. Now, in order to give off-grid electricity, what option do we have? Set up a DG set. Now the other option is biomass. So there is no comparison between DG set and a biomass. Why I am saying this, that some of the developers of biomass gasifier or combustion technology, they come up and say that the project is becoming unviable, non-remunerative from the tariff point of view. Is there any way that the tariff of the biomass-based power plants can be made a kind of a two-part tariff and linked with the price of biomass? That might help the biomass developers, rather than giving a standard pricing for a biomass-based plant. Because otherwise the biomass prices also fluctuate. And even then you will find it will be much, much cheaper than the diesel-based power plant. And that's the only way for us to go forward in India. There's just no question about it. May I now request Mr. E.P. Raja. Mr. Raja is the former chairman of Maharashtra Electricity Regulatory Commission. May I request Mr. Raja to give his views on the regulatory aspects, on also maybe throw some light on the aspect which we've just spoken, how the prices could be indexed with the biomass price, can it be two-part tariff, so that the developers will feel more comfortable.
Mr. Harry Doll has already explained the main objective of this two-day workshop, with a particular focus on biomass being the basic fuel to provide decentralized generation, which will help local communities. When I was thinking of this, it's an excellent idea. Obviously, at a macro level, it is eminently feasible. But in my mind, various thoughts came, and those thoughts were based on my own experience of the last 40 years, where at different times this country has thought of various innovative things. And I have gone through periods of huge enthusiasm when some of these new ideas emerge. They do get implemented, but did it sustain itself? Unfortunately, the answer is no. Let me give a few examples. The reason I'm giving that example is not that things are not possible, but while designing any such project, perhaps there is a learning to be got from our past experience. I remember in the 1970s, in many parts of India, there was a huge enthusiasm to set up gobar gas plants. It is using cow dung. And the idea was very good. Idea continues to be good. Because using that gobar, which is basically cow dung or animal dung, you produce electricity. And what is left behind turns out to be very good fertilizer material. So you have two products coming out of it. You have a gas, and the gas is used to produce electricity. It can also be used to do a certain amount of cooking if you want to use it that way. And what is left is very good fertilizers, rich in nitrogen. And I remember for 3-4 years, this was the talk everywhere. My experience is more limited to Maharashtra. In Maharashtra, as a young assistant collector, I have gone and inaugurated many of these gobar gas plants when they get commissioned. Later, the idea was to not only have it based only on gobar or cow dung, but also connect, wherever possible, human excreta. So you have combined things. Then you have 3 methods of combining it. You put gobar, that is the cow dung, human excreta, as well as a lot of waste material, And it did work. Wherever it was set up, it worked. But did it sustain itself? I'm sure even now there must be some plants, but it didn't sustain too long. We need to ask the questions why. The intention is perhaps certain things which were missed out while designing such programs. We need to learn from these past experiences and see how to bring it in or factor it in at the time of design itself. The first problem, remembering gobar gas, was that it was very much dependent on availability of cow dung. And the requisite quantity of cow dung. The moment what is produced in a village, the cow dung, is not sufficient, because in a certain extent these are also seasonal. Then you need to make further arrangements. If you try to include 2-3 villages, there is this issue of how will the benefits be distributed? Why should I give my dung if the benefit is being taken by somebody else? I'll come back to this, but this is one example. What happened to our gobar gas plants, which was, as I said, I've personally gone and inaugurated at least half a dozen of them during my tenure as an assistant collector in a district. And at the time we inaugurated it, it was all burning. One used to light up a stove or put a bulb on, so everything was working. Another example, India has a great problem with drinking water, just as we are talking about access to electricity, and it is often mentioned, and in the booklet of background material distributed for this conference also it is mentioned, that about 404 million people, since the population of India as per the 2011 census is 1.21 billion, that's almost 1/3 of the Indian population does not have access to electricity. Similarly, quite a large number of the Indian population does not have access to clean drinking water. And when it comes to sanitation, the position is much worse. So there has been various attempts to provide this drinking water by the least cost method. That is, you first see whether you can manage it by digging wells, then you go to bore wells, then you go to piped water supply schemes and regional piped water supply schemes. But with all that, there is another kind of problem, and that is what is called quality problems. That is, there are certain parts in India where the drinking water from the ground has excess fluoride. And it's very easy to notice if there is excess fluoride by just going to the nearby school and asking children in the class 6 or class 7 just to show their teeth open, and wherever there are black spots in the teeth is a very clear indication that the water they are drinking has excess fluoride. And this can, when continued drinking of such water over 30-40 years, etc., can create various deformities. So excess fluoride is a quality problem. At some places there is excess iron. Excess iron is a quality problem. Excess arsenic is a quality problem. Areas of West Bengal, Bangladesh has problems of excess arsenic in some stretches. Excess salinity is a problem. So there was a mission undertaken by the government of India with the participation of all the states called Rajiv Gandhi Drinking Water Mission. Under that, there was a sub-mission to do something special for those areas which have quality problems. And then a technology came, which is basically using a membrane, and depending on the dimension of the membrane, not the gross dimension, the dimension of the crystals in the membrane, the molecular dimensions, different kinds of membranes can be used for separating out these impurities. If there is excess iron, there will be a membrane which will take out those iron particles like that. Many villages were identified. States were given money by the government of India. Technology was, some were developed, some existed, were handed over to people, to companies which set it up. Like in the state of Maharashtra, a number of such, for solving quality problems, was set up in the areas near Nagpur, in Vidarbha, a number of things. And that was great work. But about 7-8 years thereafter, when I happened to, in the IAS, since we keep on changing jobs, I happened to become Secretary, Drinking Water and Sanitation. And I had to appear before the Public Accounts Committee, the Parliamentary Committee in Maharashtra. And what I had to explain was why these projects have failed. Like I remember some of the villages in Maharashtra where this had been set up. I recall from memory that a company called Thermax had set up quite a lot of them. And they were operating and maintaining it for a period of 1 year, in some cases for a period of 2 years. The entire scheme was that at that time they will also train up the local people and then hand it over to the local body, that is the village panchayat, for further maintenance. But the moment Thermax left the scene, it was only a question of time, often 1 year, at best 2 years, and these stopped functioning. I'll broadly say the lesson to be learned is, at the design stage itself, you need to work out who is going to maintain it, who is going to operate it. The operational maintenance, or thinking through the entire life of that project, what is going to be the arrangement. And the arrangement can't be only theoretical conceptualization. It needs to go deeper as what are the costs involved. For example, in case of membranes, the membranes needed to be replaced at least once in 3 or 4 years. And that costs a lot of money. Panchayats didn't have that money. Other thing that happens is, when some of these things lie there in disuse, waiting for somebody to repair it or maintain it, and as like Amartya said, we are all argumentative Indians, so a lot of debates take place. When people find that nothing is happening, slowly the components from there get stolen. A kind of vandalism starts. This was a kind of a second example. A third example was something very, very different. As you know, one of the areas where in large parts of India we have had a success story is milk production. That is, collecting milk every day from various villages, chilling it, pasteurizing it, sending it to consumptions in cities. What was fantastically done by Dr. Varghese Kurian, and that was also kind of replicated in various parts of India under a scheme called Operation Flood, which brought about a kind of a white revolution. I'm mentioning that also because that is one area where things have sustained. The white revolution brought about by Dr. Kurian extended to various parts of India slowly, and at many places it has sustained. Now, I've been asking myself how come that worked. Again, in one of my jobs, I was the managing director of a milk dairy. So that's the time when I got a full opportunity to study this in depth. I'll just narrate one small thing, more to draw a lesson. Milk used to be given by local women in villages. So every day milk is collected. Now, when milk is poured, depending on how much milk is collected, the money is paid immediately on the spot. And the rate of payment is based on the fat and solid non-fat content of the milk. So to test that, you have a small instrument called a lactometer. There used to be at the beginning some disputes whether I got paid correctly. So Dr. Kurian decided that every person who puts milk, it's mostly the ladies in the villages, they should all be given a lactometer. In addition to the collecting organization having a lactometer. So both can test simultaneously. You can test by putting your lactometer, the person who is making the payment will test putting his lactometer, and Dr. Kurian had made a clear kind of direction that if there is a difference, pay the higher amount and take a sample. We will do the adjustment later. Because the differences can come because of calibration problems with the lactometer. Differences can come because somebody has added water or somebody has mixed buffalo milk with cow milk. There can be a variety of reasons. But first pay the higher amount, whichever. If there are two lactometers used, one pay. And then take a sample, we'll test it and investigate it later. Now, so while dealing with communities, we are dealing with human beings. And if anything happens where this trust gets broken, the project fails. I'll give one other example, which was not a success example, but a failure example. There was a lot of ideas, very enthusiastic period on how to increase milk production. The amount of milk that a cow or a buffalo gives. And there used to be these, in some of the foreign countries, particularly the Scandinavian countries, milk production used to be very high, and you had this Holstein and Jersey cows. So India, in Maharashtra, the Dairy Development Department, this was also an all India program. Money was coming from the Department of Animal Husbandry, given to all states. The idea was very simple, and that is, let us import some stud bulls, which will provide service and thereby bring a new breed of genetically modified cows, where the rate of milk production will be much higher. Now here also, I did the post-mortem work in a district called Alibag, which is very near Mumbai, Raigad. I was the chief executive of that Raigad Zilla Parishad. And once again, I had to appear before the Panchayat Raj Committee, which was a parliamentary committee looking into Zilla Parishad activities. And we get these questions in advance, and I had to study very hard to be able to answer. The main question was, a stud bull which had been imported from Sweden and kept in that district had simply refused to provide any service. It had lost its libido totally. Even though I can multiply these examples. The important point I want to make is, generalizing this, I will say that there is something called a technology-human interface. Technologists come up with solutions. Now here we have manufacturers of gasifiers. That is technology. One will say, yes, technology is known. You can get electricity from solar, either through solar PV route or the solar thermal route. Biomass, you can use a gasifier. That is technology.